bilateral, multilateral donors, and private companies. As director of PFSCM, Edward oversees a supply chain services organization that sourced, procured, and delivered over $500 million worth of health commodities to over 90 countries, serving a range of clients in 2022. Edward will be then followed by Gurmeet Pilora, also from JSI PFSCM, who's going to present on PFSCM's sustainability strategy. Gurmeet is a senior supply chain advisor with JSI and has worked for over 16 years in supply chain operations and system strengthening, both in the field and at headquarter levels. And his current portfolio involves working at the intersection of climate change and supply chains. So right on point for today's topic. Gurmeet will be followed by Tidiane Joy, who will present on innovations in contraceptive packaging. Tidiane is a public health professional with 30 years of experience in healthcare in Africa and more than 20 years experience in supply chain management for malaria, reproductive health services, HIV/AIDS, laboratory, and integrated distribution systems. His roles have included program management, strategic planning, technical assistance, training, facilitation, organizational development, and new business development, and he has substantial experience working and networking with governments, NGOs, PVOs at the international, regional, and national and local levels. Dr. Ndoye is also an APICS certified supply chain professional with a doctorate in pharmacy and a master of science in public health. So we have a lot of good experience to lean on in these presentations, and I want to encourage you to put all of your questions in the chat because at the end of the presentations, Emily Day will lead a Q&A with the presenters. So get those questions in and she'll organize them, and hopefully we can cover all of them if possible. And then after that, as Sophia mentioned, we have some working group business to cover in the last 5 minutes of the meeting just before we close. So without any further delay, I'd like to present Edward Wilson.
Great. Thanks very much, John, and thank you very much, Sophia. So are you going to do the presentation or shall I?
Yes, we've got your presentation up, and we'll advance your slides. My colleague Alice is doing this.
All right. I don't see it for some reason. Maybe other people do, and it's just somehow the way I have configured my view. Can you all see it? If you can see it, that's fine. I will just charge ahead.
You can see it.
Okay, great. In that case, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to participate in this important discussion. My objective is really just to frame the discussion today and highlight why we need to talk about climate change and health supply chains. And next slide, please. So this is just a brief outline of what I'm going to cover today, and we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So why discuss this topic now? As the climate crisis has become more extreme, the need to do so is really inescapable. Supply chains are being disrupted by climate change, causing supply shortages, delays, price increases, and product losses globally, leading to patients not receiving the health products and healthcare they need when they need it. At the same time, we know that supply chains contribute to climate change through emitting greenhouse gases and generating waste and pollution. So let's explore these topics a little bit more. Next slide, please. First, just to locate ourselves and a reminder about supply chains and their position in the larger environment. Nationally, the health supply network is nested within a government's health system and its operational and contextual environments. Supply chains must satisfy demand for essential health commodities across sectors, public, private, and NGO, and supply chain management is part of a well-functioning health system. In strong health systems, supply chains respond to the requirements and goals dictated by the broad public health system. In turn, supply chains are influenced by their operating and contextual environment, affecting the design and operation of these supply chains. So how does climate change affect this environment? Next slide, please. Climate change impacts a wide range of health outcomes, which in turn impact health supply chains. The CDC diagram illustrates the most significant climate change impacts: rising temperatures, more extreme weather, rising sea levels, and increasing carbon dioxide levels, their effect on the environment, and the subsequent health impact that can result from these changes in the environment. While there's no specific reproductive health impact noted here, continuing to offer reproductive health services in the face of these climate-induced changes will be critical, and climate-induced changes will affect reproductive health supply chains. So let's look at a couple of examples. Next slide, please. We see changing disease burdens that will affect supply and demand dynamics as diseases spread and grow in intensity. And here you have a couple of examples for malaria and cholera. And we can see that climate-induced disruptions can lead to shortages and stockouts. And here we have a couple of recent examples from South Africa and from Europe. Climate-induced events or changes are affecting health supply chains. However, the reverse is also true. Next slide, please. Healthcare and supply chains in particular contribute to climate change. So not only are we being affected by it, but we're contributing to it. And as you can see, healthcare's climate footprint is 4.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which if it was a country would be the 5th largest emitter in the world, and supply chains account for 70% of those emissions. So our activities contribute to the changes that are adversely impacting the world. So what can we do? Next slide, please. So to respond to climate-induced changes and to mitigate health supply chain contributions to those changes, we will need to adapt through improved planning, design, and operations, and mitigate the impact by reducing supply chain contributions to global greenhouse gases and adopting a more circular approach to product life cycles, which reduces a product's environmental footprint throughout its life cycle. All of this is going to require a holistic systems-based approach based on enhanced visibility, trust, and collaboration throughout the supply chain. And we'll hear more about such efforts from the other two panelists. That's it for me. So over to the next.
Hi, John. Should I jump in?
Sarah, I was on mute. Yes, Gurmeet, please jump right in.
Okay, I also can't see the slides on the screen for some reason, so I'll follow along on my machine.
Oh, boy.
I hope we keep pace. So yeah, hello everybody. My name is Gurmeet Valora. I'm a senior supply chain advisor with JSI, as John mentioned, and I've also been working with our affiliate, the Partnership for Supply Chain Management, on our sustainability strategy. So next slide, please. So for us at PFSCM, we've always felt that sustainability was at the heart of what we do, really sort of central to our mission, which is to improve the health and well-being of people in low and middle income countries. So there were quite a few initiatives going on within the organization before we decided to compile a sustainability strategy. And for us, we don't feel that we can achieve our mission without really focusing on having a positive impact on the economy, society, and planet. So we decided to gather these initiatives together and really be more intentional about sustainability, recognizing that it's essential to what we do. So we brought these initiatives together under the umbrella of environmental, social, and governance framework, ESG, which I'm sure many of you have heard about in the sustainability world, if you like. But today I'll focus mainly on the environment, given that we're talking about climate change. So next slide, please. So as we gathered these initiatives together, we had quite a few solid foundations to build on. So we were already a participant of the UN Global Compact. So that meant we were adhering to and aligned with the 10 principles of the Global Compact, which again are aligned with the ESG principles. So looking at environmental, social, and governance, and looking at the environmental impact, human rights, labor, governance, anti-corruption, etc. We also had our ISO 9001 quality management system, which included those 10 principles from the UN Global Compact. So those two pieces really gave us solid foundations to build on, because we were aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we sought to work with suppliers and service providers and third-party logistics providers who also aligned with our goals and our vision around sustainability. Next slide, please. So the strategy we developed as we pulled everything together was a 1-year strategy, and the idea behind that was to focus on compiling baselines and setting targets and really looking for those improvement opportunities to be, as I said, more intentional around sustainability. So we developed 3 mutually reinforcing strategic objectives, 1, 2, and 3, that map to the ESG from environmental, social, and governance. So strategic objective 1 is around the environment, and I'll focus on that today. But we do see them as mutually reinforcing. So if you have a strong governance framework, you're more able to ensure the compliance of your suppliers around sustainability and environmental issues, etc. Next slide, please. So strategic objective 1 is mitigate the environmental impact of our operations. So this is really looking throughout our value chain and our supply chain at our operations and how can we reduce our impact on the environment. We split this into 3 sub-objectives that I'll touch on today. But really, it's about looking at our supply chain and our internal operations and what can we do to mitigate the impact. So next slide, please. So the first of these sub-objectives is really looking at our freight, our logistics emissions, so reducing the greenhouse gas and the impacts from our freight emissions. And as one of those pre-existing initiatives, we were already a member of the Global Logistics Emissions Council, and that meant we were working with their framework, the GLEC framework, to measure the greenhouse gas emissions from our logistics operations. And it also gave us a community of like-minded organizations all focused on measuring and reducing emissions and the impact from logistics operations. So we set ourselves the target, the action item under this sub-objective to establish that baseline and look across our operations to identify hotspots in our emissions, to then work across the supply chain to reduce those emissions and really look at where can we do things better. And as a fourth-party logistics provider, we're carrier neutral and we're able to work across the supply chain. And our 4PL manager often says logistics efficiency is emissions efficiency. So we have some tools like a load optimization tool that will flag large volume shipments for us and enable us to work with customers and suppliers across the supply chain to look at optimization opportunities. So for example, can we reduce pallet size but double stack pallets, maximize container usage, etc. So really looking for efficiencies in utilization of assets that also enable us to reduce emissions. Next slide, please. So the second sub-objective for us is for this environmental objective is about procurement. So really, what are we bringing into the supply chain? How are we procuring it? And then what happens to it at the end of its life? And we split this into 2 action items. The first really is establishing a baseline across our supplier base using our supplier relationship management system to map the common practices of our suppliers, for us then to identify opportunities to collaborate across the supply chain to drive down the impacts on the environment. And the second activity is we're adopting ISO 2400 standards. So that's a standard around sustainable procurement. It's not a certification, it's more of a standard, but we are examining our procurement policies and practices to then align with the sustainable procurement standards. And then we aim to seek third-party verification of compliance with the standard. So it's not a certification, but we still want some sort of independent check that we are indeed embedding sustainability throughout our procurement policies and practices. Next slide, please. And the last sub-objective under this environmental objective is really looking at our internal operations. So we have 2 offices, one in DC and then in the Netherlands, and both offices are rated as excellent for their energy usage. And we're also in the process now of establishing, again, baselines around emissions related to business travel, which might be a bit skewed because of COVID and lockdowns, etc. But really looking at where can we make improvements there. And also the waste that we generate in our offices and the electricity used. So again, trying to establish where are we now and what can we do to operate more efficiently and reduce our impact. Next slide, please. So again, that was just a run through of the environmental objective and the strategy. The full strategy is available on our website if you want to see the social and the governance as well, and the write-up for this on the website, pfscm.org. But our plan now is we aim to issue a sustainability report as this current 1-year strategy wraps up, just to report on our findings and our progress against the commitments that we made. And then we aim to issue a multi-year strategy, so building on the baselines and the lessons that we learned during this first strategy. Really, what can we do to set targets and make improvements over the coming years? And then I think that's it for me. Next slide, please. That's it. I'm not sure. Are we going to leave Q&A for the end?
Yes, we're going to leave Q&A for the end.
Okay.
And I see that people are already starting to put some questions into the chat, so that's great. I think we'll then move now to Tiran and his presentation on contraceptive packaging, and then we'll take questions for all 3 presenters. Tiran?
Thank you very much, John, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Tijan Ndoye, and I'm working currently under the Global Health Supply Chain PSM project as the task order for family planning and reproductive health. So I'm here to present on the innovations in contraceptive packaging, the work that we have initiated with our colleagues from UNFPA and USAID through the PSM project. And PSM and UNFPA are the 2 largest procurers in the public health sector of supply chain and reproductive health commodities worldwide. And we have been working together in this initiative to align our commodity packaging to become more efficient, innovative, and sustainable. And the presentation I'm doing today is just part of some of the highlights of our effort to harmonize and optimize packaging of reproductive health commodities among the 2 procurers, as well as the important role packaging can play to drive supply chain efficiencies, enhance commodity security, and maintain affordable prices in a changing environment and reduce environmental waste. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have delivered on a yearly basis around $200 million together in 30 countries. So I think one of the important things that we were looking at delivering those products in those countries is how are we packaging our products and how countries are receiving those commodities. Next slide, please. So we started with the simple question of what is the rationale for all the various packaging specifications for our contraceptive commodities, because we are seeing in the country different way of packaging these products, and why are there so many differences among otherwise interchangeable products. And we first started with a desk study that we conducted to examine the current state of packaging rationalization and divergences in the desk in the desk exercise. And then anecdotal observation in countries led us to explore more specific case studies in 4 countries to understand how variable packaging impact local supply chain. And we, looking at the global level and with an eye to donor coordination, we then conducted interviews with manufacturers who supply these products to both USAID and UNFPA. And we also asked them about best practices in packaging and if they had feedback for procurers on options that would involve cost saving and other benefits. We found many suppliers are also leading the way in reducing the environmental impact of packaging waste. So they offer a variety of options to clients. So what we've looked at is the countries that are mentioned here: Mozambique, Rwanda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Next slide, please. So what we've seen is that packaging really matter for these countries, and it's important for community security. It is relevant at all levels of the supply chain and contribute to the 6th right of logistics. And packaging assure the quality of integrity of product from the manufacture point to the service delivery point. You may first think about packaging, can protect the product from damage and temperature fluctuation, but also the labels on the packaging ensure that you know the specification of what the product is and the quantities inside the box, which is important as the product move along the supply chain. The packaging decision also affect the unit cost of the product because there are so many costs of the materials used to package these products. And it also impact on other costs such as the waste that impact the environment and product that wasted as a result of insufficient packaging. We also know that there are so many issues around counterfeit and all that, and it's important to consider those in the packaging. Next slide, please. So our scenario is one example of product packaging issue that happen at the service delivery point, but packaging has an important impact on every level of the supply chain. And in the next slide, you see that in the methodology. Next slide, please. In the methodology, our scenario, we have shared a common understanding of what green packaging is and what it can achieve. And we set out an investigation to investigate best practices in green packaging across key contraceptive product categories that we procured from USAID and UNFPA. And we developed recommended changes and tertiary packaging. Importantly, we focus on secondary and tertiary packaging because the primary packaging will imply other issue around, for example, registration and other things. So we focus on those areas only. For implementation of specific recommendation, we choose to focus on one product that is methoxy progesterone acetate intramuscular injection, as we call it, MPA-IM, because that's a high volume product for both USAID and UNFPA. So I just received a question around green packaging, which is
we can hold the question to the end if you want, TDN. We'll just take that at the end.
Yeah. So this slides basically describe part of that, and we have built on the desk review and the country case studies to really optimize our packaging to respond to the need of the countries, but also to optimize the packaging for sustainability. So as we've mentioned in previous presentations, in recent years, many consumer goods companies have made commitment to sustainable packaging. And we all have experience in our daily life of seeing products like that. For example, we've seen here in this slide that Coca-Cola is announcing that they will begin rolling out green packaging in their paper can tow in lieu of plastic rings. And this innovation was introduced already in Europe in past years. So plastic is difficult to recycle and pose a major threat to wildlife, marine life, and the environment. We all know that there is an estimated 270,000 tons of plastic floating in our oceans, and that threatens 700 marine species with its presence. So it's a real issue around the world, and I think every company is now trying to see how they can reduce their impact on that. So packaging also play an important role in almost every industry, every sector, and every supply chain. And in the pharmaceutical industry, packaging is essential to ensure the quality of the product and protect the product not only from damage, but also biological degradation. And green packaging initiative often leverage the 3 R's of sustainability, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And one of the easiest way to improve sustainability of packaging and distribution is to reduce the amount of material used. Among strategies for reducing packaging waste is to select material that can be easily reused. Reusing material keeps them out of landfill and reduces the volume of material that must be produced. Finally, use of recycled material reduces resource consumption and the impact on the environment. So few of the recommendations that we have made on the next slide. Can you move the slide over, please, John? I already covered that slide. So yeah, that's the one. So here we have made few recommendations, and in 2001, harmonization of MPA IM packaging among donors enable our supplier to allocate this product initially produced by USAID and UNFPA, reducing overall lead time by 5 months and mitigating risk of stock-out in Burundi. As demonstrated, donor harmonization of packaging enables suppliers to improve client service levels by facilitating product fungibility among clients. This can generate greater efficiencies, enable suppliers to offer reduced lead time, build inventory stock, retain minimum stock level accessible to donors, and maintain affordable donor prices. Next slide, please. In this slide, for example, we've seen that we have these traps, and plastic trap identified by these red dots that you see on the slide. On this image on the slide are made difficult to recycle because the material including polypropylene, polyester, and steel. And removal of this plastic trap from export carton can reduce environmental impact, minimize damage to export carton, and generate potential costs. In fiscal year 2022, USAID and UNFPA procured a combined 6 million vial of MPAIM, and removal of these plastic traps from those products could therefore generate a potential cost saving of $18,000. Reduction of plastic usage by up to 11 kilogram of reduction of CO2, and emission of up to 150,000 kilogram, 150,000 kilogram, and reduction of energy usage by 350,000 kilowatt annually. Next slide, please. So the next slide is removal of plastic liners and styrofoam from export carton. We have also seen that in addition to plastic, styrofoam is one of the worst packaging product for the environment, and it takes about 500 years to degrade in landfills. And based on USAID and UFPA combined fiscal year procurement volume, removal of plastic liners and styrofoam from MPAIM export carton could generate a potential cost of $4,000. A reduction of 872 kilograms of CO2 emission up to 12,000 kilograms, and reduction of energy usage of 31,000 kilowatt annually. And supplier indicate plastic liner and styrofoam edge supporters provide protection against liquid damage and moisture, but however, donors have experienced less than 1% incident rate due to water damage, supporting implementation feasibility. Next slide, please.
Okay.
The next slide is removal of logo from export carton. We also mentioned here that some logos, as you can see, are vinyl sticker logos and often added to the export carton, and they are toxic to produce and to consume. And when a vinyl sticker breaks down, it leaves behind some tiny pieces of microplastic pollutant. It's not easy to recycle, and it's additionally, it releases ink in the environment, and we have seen also some savings here by removing these logos from our export cartons. Next slide, please.
Tidian, we're running up against time.
Yeah,
so these are some great examples. Maybe you want to move to a general conclusion.
Okay, so thank you. So the next one is around, the safety box that we have seen. And I just want to conclude by saying that based on all these examples that we've mentioned, we are working on streamlining our operations, our procurement operations, to make sure that we've respond to the need of the clients, but also, as I mentioned earlier, this initiative started with harmonizing our coordinating our efforts with UNFPA, and eventually led us to start thinking about green packaging. And we will continue those efforts in coordination with our partners. And I just want to thank Morgan, Simon, and Ashley for conducting this work in relation with UNFPA. Morgan was supposed to present today, but she's in transit, and she asked me to present on her behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we do have about 10 minutes or so, or 12 minutes or so, that we can take questions and answers, and I see a number of them for Tidian, but let's try to get questions for all three of our presenters. Emily is going to facilitate this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, John, and thanks to all of our presenters today. I think, as John mentioned, we have quite a few questions for Tidian. So with that fresh in our minds, I might start with those questions first. Tidian, we have a question from John, and you touched upon this a little bit, but could you confirm if there is a standard definition for green packaging? And related question, is there a validated standard for this definition? Tidian, it looks like you're still on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned a few examples of what we consider as part of green packaging. I don't have a definition for our work in green packaging, and we don't have measurement for now. I think the next step for us is really to think about what we mean by that in our context, and as we go along, how we can make sure that we measure the progress that we are making. I have given some examples of savings that we have made or we can potentially make in the work that we do in our operations, but I think we need to fine-tune that and make sure that we have a clear definition that we all agreed on in the supply chain environment that we work in, and how we can measure it and make sure that we respond to those as we go. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And then we had a question from Safia. Can you tell us a little bit more about PSM's collaboration with manufacturers to start implementing the recommendations that you touched upon? Tidian, it looks like you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. We are collaborating, as I mentioned, during the process of the investigations and the work. We have been talking to manufacturers, and we know that almost all the suppliers and manufacturers have the same interest in reduction of CO2 and the environment. So we have started working with some of our suppliers, and the most advanced is Mission Pharma, but we are working with all of them right now. So I think that's something that will continue in the future. As the last slide, one of the last slide I showed was the results of the work that we have done with Mission Pharma. And we are also working with other suppliers in the way we package our product and the kits right now to respond to these needs. We also work with our freight forwarders, as mentioned in the previous presentation. We look at how we can use the freight forwarders in a very efficient way to respond to our needs. This is an initiative that we started under the Family Planning and Reproductive Health Task Order. What we are hoping is that we are going to continue that in all task orders in the USAID funded commodities.
Great, thanks, Tidian. And I see there was also a question from Akuzike about asking if we'd be able to share a summary of the findings and recommendations. I believe that this PowerPoint will be shared after the presentation with all participants. So looking forward to sharing that with the group. Mm-hmm. I think moving on to Gurmeet, we had a question from Milka about what examples have you identified of unethical behavior in climate and supply chains?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we haven't seen any sort of sinister activity, if you'd like, any unethical activity. I think it's more about efficiencies and having that visibility. So perhaps a manufacturer or a supplier won't consider the end use or the last mile, if you like. So in terms of packaging, could they package their items more efficiently for, say, multi-month dispensing at the last mile, if it's going to be a very remote location, etc. So it's not so much about unethical behavior that we've seen, it's more connecting the dots and linking the whole supply chain and having that collaboration. And that's more what we're trying to work on at the moment.
Great. And then we had another question for you from John. Thank you for highlighting the need to measure, report, and reduce emissions and waste. Were there any challenges in working with the manufacturers to support these standards?
To date, no, but I would say we're sort of early in the stages of really engaging across our supplier manufacturing base. But I think everybody is looking at these issues, and one organization reducing their waste and emissions has ripple effects throughout the supply chain, and it's in everybody's interest to do so. So that we haven't seen any pushback. I think everybody is looking at this, and we're all trying to figure out how can we do it together. So yeah, no challenges, but again, early days, I would say.
Great, thank you. And then Edward, could you highlight some of the operational issues PFSCM has had to address in reducing the carbon footprint?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think, as Gurmeet said, we're at the stage of collecting information and fixing our baselines and then moving forward from there. But we have already started, as Gurmeet mentioned, a number of different things to try to minimize the greenhouse gas impact of our supply chain activities, whether it's load optimization or consolidation, or improvements in packaging, as he highlighted, to make it more patient friendly, that could lead to efficiencies. And Tidiane also pointed out a number of those things. So far, we've taken a number of activities that lead to both reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and in cost efficiencies. And we'll just have to see as we finalize our baselines and look across our supply chain at additional areas for improvement where we can make improvements and gain efficiencies. But so far, I think it's really how do you maintain service levels while trying to deliver the commodities that our customers have requested of us. And so far, good, but we'll look forward to finding additional opportunities for improvement.
Thanks, Edward. John, I see you have your hand up. Before I move on to the remaining questions, did you want to say something?
Sorry, no, I had already had to put my hand down. I think I raised it earlier and forgot to put it down. I apologize.
No problem.
Let me see if I can do that.
All right.
I did have one follow-up question though.
Okay,
so far in PFSCM's research, what are the hot spots that seem to be leaping out at you as you look across the waste and emissions issues in the supply chain? I mean, because there are so many things that we do: transportation, warehousing, obviously packaging is one of those things. Were there like some quick wins or just some some really obvious sort of glaring red flags?
Yeah, I mean, transportation is the biggest one, and obviously air transportation is the biggest generator of all. So trying to find ways of really making best use of air cargo when you need to use it, and if it's possible to ship via another method or another mode that is not air, then that's going to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that you generate. But that's really, one of the biggest things that you could do. And that helps on the cost front. Obviously, depending on the products that you're moving, that may or may not be possible. So it's really looking at how you can make those moves as efficient as possible. Gurmeet, was there anything else that came out from the work that we've done so far with GLAC?
No, that's it. We're still calculating those baselines and identifying those hotspots. So hopefully in a few months we should be able to identify more. But yeah, I would say that's it at the moment, and really looking at that, optimizing the loads and the packaging, and really making the best use of the assets you have to hand.
So in terms of remaining questions, we have a couple that are cross-cutting, so they're actually for all of our presenters. Keith asked, does purchasing carbon offsets play a role in PSM or PFSCM's work in managing ESG within supply chains? I don't know if there's someone who wants to take the first stab at addressing that question.
I see that. Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
so I think from the PFSCM side, I think as we've seen from some of the global conversations as well, carbon offsets really don't, they're not really the preferred way of doing business. We would really like to see a reduction in total carbon contributions and not just have them offset. So our goal is to look at ways of reducing the amount of carbon generated throughout the supply chain and not really looking at offsets as a way of trying to back into that.
I see that Morgan, you have joined. You have anything to say on that or anything to add from the presentation?
Yeah, thanks, Tidian. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Simon from GHSC PSM. I guess to respond to the question on carbon offsets, I would kind of echo Edward's response. It's not something that we are looking into at PSM. We're rather looking to identify ways to proactively reduce environmental impact through our packaging.
Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. The next question is from Maggie. She notes that Tidian cited some examples that led to cost savings, which is a clear win-win. When taking steps to implement greener supply chains, we may actually see costs increase. How are PSM and PFSCM messaging these initiatives and any increased costs related to their end clients and donors?
Yeah, I think we can see initial increase, but I think we should look at things in the long term, in terms of how this investment will be returned. And I think if you look at it in the long term, I think it's going to be a win. Even if you start by investing, making initial investment, I think in the long term you will gain more than you will lose for that. So I think we can well advocate for an increase at the beginning of this initiative, knowing that in the long term we will have a gain in return.
And I think from the PFSCM side, what we are looking at is trying to come up with some metrics that we can use, whether it's through tools like the life cycle cost analysis tools or others, to really be able to quantify for people what the overall investment benefit of taking a more circular approach to how we operate what the impact of that's going to be. So for us, it's really not only thinking about it in the short term, what are you going to be able to get out of it, but really be able to calculate in the longer term, as Tidian says, but using some tools and metrics that are available to be able to demonstrate to people what the value of making these changes are, even if it appears to have some short-term increases in costs. As we said before, there's often a lot of efficiencies that come from doing this, which in fact means that you reduce your current costs, whether it's for transportation or warehousing or whatever they might be, if you've got more efficiency in your packaging and delivery. So we're looking at both the ways of you measuring short-term efficiency, but sort of longer-term life cycle costs as well. I don't know, Gurmeet, do you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's sort of shifting everybody's business model to incorporate these considerations and looking for those efficiencies and the win-wins, and looking at the total cost. The long-term view is very important, and I think more and more, people are recognizing the imperative to act. We can't just carry on as business as usual. So, yeah, I would say that's it.
Great, thank you. And I see John just put another question kind of as a follow-up in the chat. How do you share the benefits of efficiency across partners?
I think that's something we're trying to quantify through looking at total cost of ownership calculations that would include the environmental impact. Yeah, and I think again, you know, if you look at it, each organization is trying to reduce their impacts and report on those reductions. Reductions throughout the supply chain impact everybody in the supply chain, so you're able to report on those reductions. So I think collaborating across the supply chain, everybody can reduce, you know, their scope 3 emissions, their value chain emissions, and things like that. So really, it all comes together as a win-win again for everybody along the chain.
Yeah, I gave some example in my presentation of some of the means. For example, if you remove the, you know, the stickers, you know, how that simplified operation for the suppliers, or, you know, if we harmonize with GNFPA, how we can exchange products. And I gave the example of Burundi. So there are a few examples that we can see, you know, to share the benefit of these, you know, streamline these operations with other partners. And I can multiply the examples of, you know, sharing with partners. So yeah, I think there are a lot of things that, you know, different organizations can win in these initiatives.
Thank you all. I think we have time for one more last question from Jason. He says, I hope in the future we can have a second conversation on climate resilient supply chains, or just more generally resilient supply chains. Conflict, pandemic, and other crises create similar challenges. Has anyone modeled costs of making supply chains more resilient?
I would say you know, at least for us, that's in the beginning stages of really trying to figure out how you calculate both the costs and the benefits of resilient supply chains and applying a framework to it. Because I think if you want to pursue the goal of resiliency, it's at some point you have to be able to demonstrate what value you gain from it and what the costs are in there. And I think for us, being able to attach metrics to all of those things are important. And we're beginning that process now of thinking about how you could do that so that you don't end up with just which is the cheapest procured or delivered price is the best, but really how do you factor in the value of resilience in making your sourcing and supply chain design and delivery decisions, so that you get a better understanding of both what you're getting and what it's costing you and what the value of what you're getting is. So for us, it's a kind of a work in progress to be able to put some real numbers and metrics with that. But I think in the end, if we're going to really be able to push resilience as a concept, we're going to have models to be able to show the finance people in particular what the value of building resilience into our decisions is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to have a strong way of measuring that, and I don't think we are quite yet there. I think that's probably one of the next steps in the work that we'll be doing.
Well, I think we're going to have to encourage a continuing discussion on this, but we have 4 minutes left, and Safia, we have some AOB. So first, I want to thank the presenters and also Emily for encouraging us to think about this important topic. And hopefully we will now include more of these sorts of discussions in our future meetings. Safia?
Great. Thank you, John. And thanks again to all of our great presenters and Emily for moderating this very good session for us. We wanted to let you know that in the coming weeks, we're going to be updating the SSWG's work plan. A few of you might be points of contact for items on the work plan, and this is to let you know that if you are, we'll be reaching out to you to touch base prior to the meeting that we will hold to review work plan updates. And we last reviewed and updated the work plan about mid-year last year. And so we're looking forward to doing that again. Additionally, I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm very glad that we're planning the next annual membership meeting in person for the coalition. As many of you have attended these in the past, you know that it's been a long time. The last one was held in 2019 in Kathmandu. We're hoping to soon be sending out a save the date to you, and we look forward to, in that context, to be planning with you for the SSWG meeting that will be held at the GMM. John Durgovich, those were the points that I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Safia. And again, we're going to try to hold meetings and technical discussions more frequently than we did last year if we can. We might even be shooting for something at the end of February or March. So, and we'll be reaching out to people to, who might be interested in presenting on various topics. Also, please feel free to send us, any areas of interest that you'd like to see in the system strengthening working group calendar. We're glad to have ideas and to invite people to participate. I think that's all I really had to say. Unless there are other comments, we can call this meeting effectively closed for the first meeting of 2023.
Thank you.
Bye now. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.